Good evening, D&D fans. I'm Sparkle's Devil Monster, and tonight we're reviewing Dragon Magazine number 11 from 1977. If it looks like I just lost a fight, it's because I have a 1-year-old devil monster with sharp claws living in my home. All right, here we have the cover of Dragon number 11. As you can see, there is some impish figure, perhaps a gnome, dressed in red with a little hat, selling a monster, maybe an ettercap, to the circus. That is a pretty cool image. I could see using that for inspiration for a random encounter in my home campaign. So, already Dragon number 11 is off to a good start here with some excellent cover art. Next, as usual, I like to look for a villain, and Dragon number 11 does not disappoint. This is the wereshark, a female wereshark, and she is fighting a character who would make a good ally, the protagonist of the Lankhmar series, Fafhrd, F-A-F-H-R-D. I have no idea how else to pronounce Fafhrd. As you can see, he has already lost his right hand, which he's replaced with a hook. And he's fighting the wereshark, who is referred to as the sea rack woman. Perhaps she's trying to sink his vessel as well. She can swim, but he cannot. In my latest campaign, Curse of Strahd, which we just finished, one of the players became a were-raven, and that, of course, led to a great adventure, a trip to visit the Raven Queen in the Shadowfell. But one of the most notable new abilities he acquired as a were-raven was immunity to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage from non-magical weapons not made of silver. All characters who contract the curse of lycanthropy in D&D, and that would include the weresharks, have immunity to non-magical weapons that are not silver. So be careful. If you swim with sharks, it's best to be a shark. All right, now for an NPC. So this story, Sea Magic by Fritz Lieber, author of the Lankhmar series, which back in the 70s was perhaps the most famous fictional property that D&D worked with, has a character named Gale. Gale accompanied Fafhrd in his practicing. The silver-blonde 13-year-old girl now trudged about with him collecting arrows, half of them transfixing his target, which was a huge ball. To keep his bow out of the way, Fafhrd carried it as if over his shoulder, maimed left arm closely bent upward. "They ought to have an arrow that would shoot around corners," Gale said, apropos of hunting behind a standing stone. "That way you'd get your enemy if he hid behind a house or a tree trunk." "It's an idea," Fafhrd admitted. "Maybe if the arrow had a little curve in it," she speculated. "No, then it would just tumble," he told her. "The virtue of an arrow lies in its straightness. It's—" "You don't have to tell me that," she interrupted impatiently. So that's Gale, and she doesn't get too much characterization other than that she's 13 years old, she's a little blonde archer girl, and she likes the idea of arrows that can shoot around corners. Well, in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you actually get that with the sharpshooter feat, more or less, because you can ignore cover, both half and 3/4 cover, although you can't ignore full cover, so if you can't even see the target, there's no way the arrow can actually curve around the corner and hit him. But if you can see just a little bit of the target hiding behind cover, maybe even just the ear, you can take the ear off with an arrow shot. All right, next up we have some information to flesh out the world. And on page 26, we have an excellent discussion of quarterstaff fighting rules with an image as well. And the article describes quarterstaff fighting rules as the highest form of art in medieval England. In medieval England, the art of staff fighting was taken to its highest form. Well, I'm sure the Shaolin monks would beg to differ. I actually had the opportunity to meet one in my travels in China. He said that a quarterstaff should be quite thick, at least an inch in diameter, and that in the hands of a skilled aggressor can be used to break bone, even the skull, so or legs or arms. So the quarterstaff is quite dangerous. In D&D, it's given a pretty decent damage die. It's up there with various kinds of swords. And all the weapons in 5th edition D&D can be used to deal either lethal damage or non-lethal damage. So when you take an enemy to 0 hit points, it's up to you if you want to kill your enemy or show mercy and just knock the enemy out. In movies and TV shows, fantasy shows like Shannara, which I just finished watching on Netflix, quite good. The enemies just point the sword at their foe and then the foe gives up. So I suppose if you had the tip of a sword at your throat, you could consider that being at 0 hit points and giving up. But usually what happens in games is they'll hit them with the pommel of the sword to knock them out. The quarterstaff, though, is really the only weapon I can see where it actually makes sense that you could choose to deal lethal or non-lethal damage with it, depending on where you strike them and how hard you hit them. Hit them in the back of the head, around the brainstem, and you're likely to kill them, just like you would a rabbit. Okay. Hit him in the jaw and you'll knock him out right on the button. Next we have Brawling, the Easy Way Out on page 7. So this is a good issue of Dragon Magazine for discussing non-lethal damage. Often, player characters in a party will come into conflict. They may even want to fight. As the dungeon master, you'll want to do everything you can to encourage them to use non-lethal combat if the party's going to fight among themselves. Or if they're fighting with NPCs in a tavern and they don't want to bring the law down on them, it's best they don't murder everyone present. And in that sense, brawling really is the easy way out. Here we have a picture of a Tavern Brawl in 1st edition Dungeons & Dragons. 5th edition has a feat called Tavern Brawler, which gives you proficiency with improvised weapons like that bottle that the woman's going to hit someone with. An improvised weapon is just whatever you can pick up that's lying around, and then you can deal a d4 damage instead of just 1 point of damage, plus your strength bonus that you would normally deal through unarmed combat. All right. Next, we have some miniatures for sale in an advertisement on page 25. And they are miniatures of the demon princes, Demogorgon and Orcus. So Demogorgon there is the 2-headed demon with the tentacle arms. He is a demon of madness. And Orcus with the wings there is a demon prince of death and undeath. Both are very famous, and you'll have to wait for other publications to find out some details about them, but at least you can see their early miniatures there, probably made of pewter. All right, as for a spell, I didn't really find a good one. In the sea magic fiction, the sea rack woman casts Charm Person, it seems, on Fafhrd, but not by name, really. There's just a bit of a description. And Fafhrd followed her, not knowing behind his forehead or really caring whether her gaze or smile had cast an actual enchantment upon him, but only that this was the direction in which he wanted to go, away from the toils and puzzlements and responsibilities and boredoms of Salthaven, and toward the vast south. And Mouser and Lonkmar, her way, and whatever mysteries she stood for. All right, probably Charm Person, maybe Dominate Person. Then an item, perhaps a magic item, on page 17 of the same story. There is a description of what seems to be a magical D12. The abysmal scene darkened, then brightened as he dipped his hand into the pouch at his waist and brought it out again, holding something as big as a girl's fist. The floating globes and sinuosities moved toward inquisitively, jogging and jostling each other. Their flaring glows rebounded through the murk from a lacy yet massy, small gold globe showing between his thin, clawed silver fingers, its 12 thick edges like those of a hexahedron embedded in the surface of a sphere and curving conformably to that structure. He proffered it to her. The golden light gave the semblance of life to their hawk-like features. "Sister," he breathed, "it is now your task, and Gias is laid upon you to proceed to Rhyme Isle and regain our treasure. Taking vengeance or not as the opportunity affords and prudence counsels, whilst I remain here, unifying the forces and regathering the scattered allies against your return. You will need this last cryptic treasure for your protection, and as a hound to scent out its brothers in the world above." All right. It was kind of fun to read, but that item doesn't really sparkle for me. What is it? Some kind of magic D12 that somehow protects you and also is like a dowsing rod that tells you when the other magic D12s are nearby. And anyway, a villain's giving it to his sister, who I believe is the wereshark, the sea rack woman from the story. And nothing really comes of it, at least not in this short story. So finally, on page 5, we have the wild card. It is an editorial by Gary Gygax, creator of D&D himself. View from the telescope, wondering which end is which. And although I generally love Gygax's articles in Dragon Magazine, and of course his excellent Greyhawk material and other D&D material, I can't say this article sparkled for me. I'm an attorney, but I'm not an intellectual property lawyer. And this editorial is just an ode to copyright law. He really hates people ripping off D&D. He calls them jackals. He says he can't believe how people get angry at him when he defends his copyright. Just a few crumbs or a small slice, which we wouldn't miss anyway. Pretty nervy, huh? What the hell do we mean trying to protect our rights and deny some enterprising plagiarist a windfall anyway? I cannot resist the analogy of a lion standing over its kill. The vultures scream and the jackals yap when the lion drives them off without allowing them to steal bits of meat. Perhaps a hyena will manage to successfully grab off a mouthful, but that is all. Other lions may also prey upon the same herd and make even bigger kills, but that is the law of the land. Pardon me, please, if this picture is not to your liking. Well, all right, I'll pardon you, but only because it's 1977 and you just created D&D, and you don't realize, perhaps, that this isn't your typical intellectual property. It's not a Disney movie. It's not a novel that you wrote. This is a collaborative storytelling endeavor, and your players need to be partners with you for this to work, which includes the Dungeon Masters as well, who also play D&D in their own way. Wizards of the Coast has done much better than Gary Gygax did with the open system reference documented license and with the Dungeon Masters Guild. So with that, I have to say, overall, Dragon Magazine number 11 deserves a 6 out of 10. That is a passing grade, and so deserves some sparkles. Here we have sparkling water. This is coconut pineapple. To all you D&D players out there and to Dragon Magazine, may you enjoy your games and tell some awesome tales. See you next time.